Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located, everybody. We're really excited to have you all here. Thank you for taking the time to attend this. My name is Jacob Jasperson. I'm with Culture Concepts, and I have the pleasure of being able to moderate the discussion for this afternoon. Just a couple of really quick things before we jump into it, because I know you're all eager to get started here. This webinar is being recorded, and we're going to have a link to it up on the respective websites, and we're going to link to those at the end as well. So there will be a link up to the webinar that you guys can take a look at and share with anybody else who you think might get value out of this. We are going to be doing a kind of more of a conversational-based format, so feel free to send questions on. You can see there's a little question box down in the right-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to send questions throughout the presentation, and we are going to answer them as we get to them and as there's natural breaks in the conversation. So feel free to send questions at any point in the presentation. We're also going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if we don't get to all the questions during the presentation, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So what we're going to be talking about today, we've got two terrific panelists representing two great companies, Utribo and PointNTime. And what we're going to be talking about today is capturing those customer conversations in Salesforce. We're going to talk a little bit about why Salesforce really isn't designed right now to capture those customer conversations. We're going to talk about what the value is for you as an organization to capturing those customer conversations. And we're going to talk about how you can improve your ROI and ultimately improve the sales that you are making by just taking a couple of simple steps to capture some of that information in your conversation. So for our presenters today, we've got Travis Davis, President and CEO of PointNTime, and we've got Mark Slockenberg, who is the co-founder and VP of Sales at Utribo. And I'm going to let each of them kind of introduce their respective companies and talk a little bit about themselves, because I know we want to get right into the discussion here. But really what we're going to be going over today, you can see the agenda, so we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to try to move as quickly as we can so that we can get plenty of time for questions. But really, we want to talk about what does your CRM really know right now? And more importantly, why is it not designed to capture the type of information that I need during a meeting or an agenda type of a discussion? And how do I go about creating that culture of constant meeting improvement? How do I continue to capture that information and, more importantly, act on it in order to help generate more leads and to help close more sales? So we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to get into a couple of examples, and then we're going to talk about what happens after the meeting. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark, who's going to talk about Utribo and talk about himself.
Well, not too much about myself, but we'll talk a little bit about Utribo. Utribo's, we're a fairly new company, and what we do is we develop in-context collaboration solutions that are designed to enhance small business productivity for companies that use Salesforce. Our flagship product is a product called salesamp, and what it does is it handles in context real-time conversations with customers and captures that information right into Salesforce, into the native objects within Salesforce. It's available on AppExchange. You can just search on either Utribo or salesamp within the AppExchange framework, and you can try the product right today. Over to you, Travis, to talk a bit about PointNTime.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Travis Davis. PointNTime is really about capturing more than just meeting notes in your meeting, but what's kind of the invisible stuff, and really documenting that for protecting your revenue one meeting at a time, and we'll go into what that exactly means. We were founded 2011. We got about 41,000 users worldwide of our application, Meeting Mapper. And to date, we've completed a little over 1 million meetings in 65 different countries. We average about 25 new users a week. Here's some of our customers. We partner with Salesforce and Oracle, Utribo, and we're available on the AppExchange. Just do a search on Meeting Mapper. Also on iTunes, just search on Meeting Mapper, and the iPad app is free. So if you're good, go up there and check it out, and we appreciate it. Again, thank you for taking the time this summer to join us.
Do you want to go ahead, Travis, and click, or shall I do it for you?
Oh, I'll click. I'm sorry. So what does your CRM really know? As you know, it's very hard to capture what really goes on in the meetings because it's just not a very graphical or easily interface to enter data other than just maybe some meeting notes. So we really need to know who was in the meeting, what was their stance, what was their role, what was discussed, what was agreed upon, what are the action items, what are the next steps, and then how do we take all this information in a meeting and actually populate it in Salesforce to make sense out of it. And that's what really the importance of Utribo and PointNTime is together, is taking that information and really putting it in a format that's user-friendly to not only the user, but management to understand exactly what's going on in their accounts and opportunities very granularly, very transparently on a day-by-day basis. So it's really what the essence of what CRM is supposed to be about.
Yeah, and Travis, it's not only just what you're trying to capture, but also the magnitude. So, how many times have I talked to my customer, and how long have I talked to them, and what was it related to within the Salesforce world, leads or opportunities and so on.
That's 100% correct. It's just all this information that you've tried to capture, and you've never been able to capture it easily, I should say. So you're 100% right, Mark. So why can't I capture this information? Well, Salesforce is not an easy way to enter information. It's very text-based. It's just not easy to do. There's no place to actually organize everything from a single input and distribute that information out through the whole Salesforce environment. There's many distractions going on with your reps. They're traveling. They're on the phone. They're out of office. They're busy. They're closing business every day. The percentage of reps that are just, creating new leads and things like that is not in comparison to the amount of time they spend with customers trying to build those leads into opportunities and close the current opportunities. So we got to have the right tools, you got to have the right services, and you got to have the right technology in order to turn every meeting into a meaningful meeting that at the end closes revenue, or sometimes just walk away. You've got to know the information early on because your time is really too valuable. So, customer meetings are often unplanned. Mark, can you kind of go into, some of the unplanned meetings and how you kind of manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we do that, okay, so yeah, one thing that we find is that it's one thing about capturing information, but salespeople are constantly, as we mentioned, are constantly on the move. They're on the go. They have a little bit of they're easily distracted by the big opportunity or lead. But for the most part, a lot of the times when they make contact with a customer, it's not always planned. I can't always schedule a meeting in the future to have a perfect call with the perfect plan. Sometimes you just end up getting somebody on the phone because you were doing a little hunting, or sometimes the customer calls you. I know if you look at the call history of sales reps, you'll find they call a lot more than they receive calls, but they do receive calls. And in order to capture that information, you need to have the tools to be able to capture them.
Yep.
Hey guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, Travis. We got our first question here though, and I'm sure we're going to touch on this a little bit later. But one of the questions that we have coming in here is, why do we really need a separate application to plan and execute a meeting? What's wrong with, I guess, the traditional approach of keeping my meeting agenda separate from all of my contact information? I think we're going to touch on that a little bit later, but maybe if you wanted to just real high level talk about some of the benefits of having all this information together.
Yeah, so Salesforce was never designed for the end user. It was designed for management to be able to track what their sales reps are doing, to be able to generate revenue, beat the competition, and close deals more quickly. So you've got to be able to, from a single input instance, be able to not only, you create your meeting, you send out the meeting invites, you send out the agendas, you track the actionable intelligence out of all your meetings, who attended, what was their stance, what was their role, notes, internal notes, things like that. But you've got to be able to do that in an easy fashion, because what happens is, if you don't have this data in Salesforce in a very easily decipherable way that I can check it as a manager very quickly, then the likelihood of when the account rep leaves the company, that they're going to take that information with them. If I don't have it in Salesforce, the likelihood of me closing that opportunity in the same amount of time has reduced tremendously. So I've got to have all that data in Salesforce so I can continue the conversation and protect my revenue one meeting at a time. And that's what the importance of an add-on app into Salesforce is, to be able to capture this data, single entry, multi-output in a user-friendly environment, because you really can't do that now within Salesforce. You can't send a meeting invite out by nature. You can't really take public and private notes. You can't separate that data easily. You really can't put who's in the meeting, and you can't search a blob of data. You've got to have structured data to be able to run these analytics to know exactly what's going on.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe I'm going to hand this back to Travis again, but maybe we could talk about creating, what do we need to do to be able to create a culture of constant meeting improvement?
Well, first of all, it's important to know that, Meeting Mapper along with utribo works with your current sales methodology. There's no reason to say, oh, I need to go to some other methodology. We work within the framework of your methodology. So it's important to plan your meeting. You spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort getting a meeting. So if it's planned correctly, the likelihood of success is greater. You've got to be able to execute it. You've got to know what happened the last time I talked to somebody. Were they for or against what I was trying to sell them? I've got to execute it, and I've got to execute it very crisply. I've got to review and analyze. I've got to follow up. And it's not just sending an email, hey, we talked about this. It's what dashboards, what reports that I can generate to understand not the activity, but what's going on inside of the activity. So you're constantly improving your meeting management, because if you can reduce a meeting, a close a deal, reduce it by one meeting, you'll beat the competition, because they're still trying to get that meeting that you just closed in. So that's why it's important for the constant meeting improvement. And one thing that these applications do is provide that in a very easy, intuitive way. So you got SalesAmp, you got tools, you got Meeting Mapper. These are all tools within Salesforce to be able to plan, execute, review, and analyze very quickly with proven technology.
So why don't we get into some examples? And I think I think in a perfect world. Just one quick question to the from the audience was: will we be distributing a copy of the presentation, Jake?
Yes, we will be.
Okay, yeah, we'll provide a hard copy of the presentation. Plus, there'll also be a recording that you can review as well. So let's skip on to the plan call. Let's skip on to a plan call, which is where I've made an appointment with the customer, and I'm going to be doing a meeting with them. Why don't you take us through that, Travis?
All right. Great. Well, thanks. So it's very easy to plan your meeting. Meeting Mapper is 100% native to Salesforce, and what we do is we can build a meeting based on a template. So if this is an initial meeting, if it's a lead, if it's a closed meeting, ID decision makers, we can build templates out within Meeting Mapper and utilize those when I create this meeting. Because I've got to know what's the location. That could be physical, who's it related to, a contact, an account, an opportunity case, campaign, so on. Start time, duration, how long am I spending in meetings for a particular stage of an opportunity or for a customer? What's the conference ID? Again, you can put whatever you use in there. You can set it up, and the type of meeting. It's important to know where your meetings are taking place. Are they at the EBC or the Customer Success Center? Are the reps that are using these attaining their quota quicker? So now this becomes a best practice. Is it at conferences? Is it on-site? Is it with the customer? Is it home office? That's very important to know, and it's very easy to set up right in Meeting Mapper, right in Salesforce. So once I've set this meeting up, it actually puts the, go back one, it actually puts the person, me as the organizer, and the meeting attendee in the meeting with a color-coded stance based on the last time I talked to them. Green, for, red against, yellow neutral, blue's a participant. And also, I can start the meeting by clicking on my utribo button here to open that bridge up. So now I'm doing a remote meeting or somebody's calling in, and I'm able to capture this information. I can change the cloud to better depict a table that I'm actually sitting at. As you can see, we already mapped it to the account. We've already built out our goals and objectives based on our template. We can do many things. One of the most powerful things is that I can actually go in and I can create rich text notes, both public and private. So I can take all the notes about the meeting, and there's some things I may want to capture that are only relevant to the internal team, and I don't want to send it to the customer. You can look at this, I get an email, I don't read it very thoroughly, and I reply all. I go back and look and I go, maybe I should have read it a little better. So we separate this data for you when you type it in inside Meeting Mapper. You can also save it as a doc to be able to send it out independently other than through Meeting Mapper. We can send meeting invites. It takes no configuration with your mail client with your standard ICS file. We can send an agenda. All these different things right from the meeting. We can add participants. I can add a new contact in Salesforce to this meeting, and we'll place them in the correct account automatically. So it's very, very powerful from that perspective.
Hey Travis, we've had a couple of questions here, and everybody's loving the discussion and the actual demonstration of what is kind of going on here. We had one question just asked for a little bit of clarification between what SaleSamp does versus what Meeting Mapper does. Could you and Mark maybe, and I don't know if you want to touch on that now or if you want to maybe do that a little bit later on, but could you maybe clarify exactly what both of those platforms do?
Meeting Mapper's perspective, we don't do any type of telephony. I mean, we don't, you know, if you use whatever provider you use, we'll accept it. But the power of utribo and Meeting Mapper is that I take that bit of that step out of the way. You know, we capture the meeting notes, but you can also capture things in utribo very quickly. So there has a very good relationship being able to, you know, move an opportunity or lead further along the sales cycle. Mark, anything on that?
Yeah, great. And that's where, and there's the tiniest bit of overlap in terms of how we capture information. Clearly, Meeting Mapper is much more comprehensive in the way that it's capturing information about a meeting. We take notes, but we're really about the telephony. What we do is we turn your PC or Macintosh into a phone that's integrated into Salesforce. In effect, Salesforce is your communication tool with your customer, where you can make and receive calls, either on your desktop or on your mobile phone. So those two tools working together are very powerful.
I agree. Does that suffice? Does that meet the question? The answer to the question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yep.
Is there another question also?
We've got a few more questions. We can either jump on some of them now, or we can keep moving forward and answer a few of them at the end. But one of the questions, and I think we touched on it a little bit with this discussion, but one of the questions that came up is, what happens if I drastically change direction in a meeting? Meaning, I had an agenda that I wanted to follow, and now that meeting has completely changed direction. How do I update those meeting topics on the fly?
Okay, that's actually a great question. So you can, if the goal objectives have changed during your meeting, you can go ahead and change those during the meeting. It does not affect the template, but it will save it for this meeting. So I could say, this whole direction's changed. what I thought was going to be an easy meeting turned out that they opened a support call, and I didn't even know about it. One thing Meeting Mapper does that I didn't elaborate on is you can put a list of prerequisites for a meeting. So when I create this meeting, it's automatically based on the template. It's going to send me an email as an organizer saying, hey, here are the meeting prerequisites. And you can put whatever you want in there, like go to Hoover's, look at support calls, make sure you got the right demo, make sure you got the right PowerPoint. So you get that email as soon as you set up this meeting. But you can always change anything in the goal objectives during the meeting. No problem. Doesn't affect anything other than that meeting in that time.
Perfect. Thank you.
So one of the other things we do that's very unique to Meeting Mapper is you guys have been in meetings, either as a manager or an individual, and you always get asked this question, what resonated in the meeting? What did the customer like? And you're going, they're like this and this. You've never been able to track it. So based on a template, we have what we call meeting insights. And they could be sales pitches, they could be product improvements, they can be whatever you want. You put 10 of them per template. At the end of the meeting, you select what 3 things really resonated with the customer. What did the customer really gravitate towards? Or what sales messages got across? Or what marketing messages? Then you select it, and then you go after you select the top 3, you then can select the bottom 3. What didn't resonate? Maybe everything was okay, but maybe some things that didn't resonate. So, bam, I can fill that out, and then later on we'll show you what it actually feeds inside Salesforce. So I've done my meeting insights. I'm to the point now that once this is done, you always hear the thing about, how was your meeting? And they go, oh, it was great. Well, what's a great meeting? Well, the demo went well. We went to lunch. That's not a great meeting. A great meeting is, for example, I closed the deal, and open another opportunity. So with Meeting Mapper, you're allowed to score the meeting. By default, we have 1 through 5. You have the score, and you put the reason for the score. You just can't say, number 4, well, did it meet one of these criteria in this drop-down that sales management has came up with? Well, no, then it's not that number. Look at number 3 or whatever. And you can put the default value, whatever you want, but you can add whatever you want here. Yeah, you know what? It was a good meeting. I moved it to the next stage. And again, that's all trackable inside Salesforce.
So Travis, one of the other questions that just popped up here, and it's really more of a comment rather than a question, but basically this person is saying, so this is a method of doing an instant debrief after a meeting and then feeding that information into Salesforce. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's 100% correct, and we can actually send a meeting report right after the meeting to the customer that's sanitized. And then I can send a different one to my sales team or my boss. It has everything that happened in the meeting, the role, the stance, why somebody's for, why somebody a champion, everything, so they don't have to call me and say, hey, how'd the meeting go? They can continue on what they do because they're not logged into Salesforce all the time. I can continue on what I do because I'm on my next meeting. I'm ready to go. And then we also create what we call an opportunity report that takes everything that's ever happened in that meeting. So log a task with utribo, you log a task with outside of Meeting Mapper, you do a meeting, and we all centrally locate it in the opportunity report, which then you can use for brief new sales folks. You can use it in case somebody leaves. I can do a quick read at 25 minutes, can save your quarter. And I can take, and because of continuity or a continuation of the sales cycle, where I already know all the players, I don't have to figure it out. I go ahead and close that deal immediately. I know that Martina's been for. I know that if she doesn't get this project done, she doesn't get a bonus. Well, I wouldn't have known that unless I had my meeting notes. I have those. Now I'm going there, hey, Martina, let's get it done. So you're 100% correct. Pre-planning, post, and during is really the scope of Meeting Mapper. So let's go to the next. So what you see is, just because I entered it in the meeting page, you go, well, where did it go? Well, we feed not only the meeting page, we feed the contact record, we feed the opportunity, we feed the account, we feed everything that parent-child relationship that relates to that object, that opportunity or whatever. We even can send out next steps and action items to people, assign them, and update the progress in Meeting Mapper. So everything you can do right here. So this is basically, I can click on it, I can open the meeting, and I can see exactly what's going on. If you plan a meeting in the future, it puts it as a scheduled event. Once the meeting has happened and you click completed, we put that in activity history automatically. You don't have to do anything. So single input, multi-output to feed your Salesforce ecosystem. Again, you're protecting your revenue one meeting at a time.
Great. That was a great presentation, Travis. I think now what we'd like to talk about is not all calls are planned, and some of the best calls happen unexpectedly. And so let's try and show an example where SalesAmp and Meeting Mapper can work together in that scenario. So, again, we're doing our job. We're using our computer. We're away from our desk. We receive, but we do receive calls on occasion, or we make calls that unexpectedly get a hold of the person we're trying to contact. Sales reps are constantly trying to do that. But what do I do once that call happens? Well, let's take an example of a call that comes in. And let me stop here, and this will perhaps answer the question about the difference between SalesAmp and Meeting Mapper. What SalesAmp is really a plugin for Salesforce that turns your Salesforce into a calling, making and receiving call tool. So you'll see in the sidebar here, you see the SalesAmp sidebar. And there's some aspects to the sidebar I want to just mention briefly here. You'll see I have a little call status section where I can see that the call's coming in. And you'll see a little context component, which tells me either where the call's coming in from or where I'd like to store the information related to it. Let's go ahead and answer this call. So I've answered the call, and you'll see here that the call's actually been, the sidebar's been updated. You'll see that the calls actually come in from Martina Dorn. And Martina's with MedLife, and you'll see there's all these objects here in the sidebar. These are different opportunities, leads, contacts related to Martina. And I can choose to log this call, this live call, with that object. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight, I'm going to click in the sidebar on Martina's name, and I'm going to come into her contact record. And we'll see here that Martina's had, we've had some activity with Martina recently. I'm going to make some notes. Let's just say that I've got the call was successful. I can make some notes in the sidebar, and those will be associated with an activity related to Martina or to the object that I've selected in the sidebar. And to see that, you'll see that, oh, actually, Martina's been calling us quite a bit. So I guess perhaps she wants to talk to us. It's always good when the customer's calling us. Next thing we'll take a look at the past Meeting Mapper meetings. We'll see that we've had a couple meetings in the past. And I know Martina is a very important customer, so I'm going to go ahead and start a new meeting. And with that, I come right back to Travis's setting up a new meeting page, and we go through the benefits of the Meeting Mapper solution. Travis?
Yeah, so again, I would choose a title, pick the template. Maybe I could have a template called, customer calls in, and there's some things that I need to do from a goal and objectives perspective for that call. As you'll see, it already links Martina to the meeting. So I don't have to go back in and say, oh, where do I got to link this or connect it to? It's already done that. We can choose the date and time of that. And again, the conference information, don't worry about, was a home office. So then I already set the meeting up. And again, I can go through it once I'm completed with this window, and it brings me into the meeting page and already adds Martina in that meeting. And now we can start documenting what we're talking about very, very quickly.
Great. Thanks, Travis. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So we've had our meeting, and we've collected these activities and we've collected the meeting information, but what do we do after the meeting? Yes, absolutely. Travis has talked about how we can share that information with the team during and after the call, but any organization should have a good plan about how they want to review the actions and outcomes of the types of meetings they're having and sharing those results with the team. Having a methodology and having an approach and constantly improving that is going to help your organization. And also, we're capturing information at a larger scale here than just a single meeting. We can actually look at the number of meetings, the number of calls that we're having, and identify areas that are working and not working for us. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's take a look at, the first is some meeting mapper dashboard, where I can get a lot of information at a high level about all of the meetings that I'm having in my organization. Travis, maybe you could talk about some customer experiences you've had.
All right, what this screen shows, so Meeting Mapper ships with two different dashboards. One dashboard, we call it what's hot, what's not. So as I talked about earlier, those meeting insights, so meeting insights fill this dashboard. Sales management, marketing, executives can look almost real time and see what's resonating in customer meetings. Now, what's the benefit of that data? Wow, I'm going to do an email campaign based on the business value of these customers that are in this stage of a particular opportunity. Or I want to go ahead and I'm capturing about new products, new product features for the next rev. What do customers really like? Now I can have downstream information in my product group to reprioritize, throw the whole thing out or figure out what I want to do from a product perspective. I can also look at what messages are resonating from a sales perspective. So when I get a new rep and I say, hey, this is what you need to talk about in this particular stage of an opportunity, and your likelihood of having a very successful meeting and moving the deal further along is much greater. Or what's not hot, right? Okay, I don't want to talk about some things. But you notice maybe you talk about pricing, and you go, well, that's not hot. That's actually a good thing because you're not getting any pushback on pricing. So this feeds it, as soon as they complete the meeting, it feeds it automatically. And again, this is available for the entire executive team or whoever to look at it and to see exactly what's resonating in real time across the whole organization. Very powerful. And you can change your meeting insights whenever you want. And that's meeting insights. The next dashboard is really about things that you have never been able to capture in a meeting. You've never really been able to, Mark, can you forward that, please?
Yeah, I think you're there. Meetings, you're on.
Okay, all right, it's not refreshing on my screen yet. So you've never been able to really capture some of this information. So say, hey, you know what? I've got 25 opportunities and these different stages. Well, how many meetings are you having for a stage of an opportunity? I've got 18 opportunities in the prospecting phase, but I'm actually having meetings with the customer in this phase. So that's important, not just they're sitting there, right? I'm having a dialogue with my customers. If I have a rep that's having, 4 meetings to ID the decision maker, there's a couple things. That's not a deal. And the next time the customer says, let's have a meeting, you go, you know what? I don't know who the economic buyer is or whatever. Then you can say, it's not a deal and walk away. Or as a manager, I go, you're in the account. I need to help you get to the level to identify the decision makers. So now I use it as a mentoring tool so I can track, with this Meeting Mapper 360 dashboard, there's 13 or 12 or so different reports in that dashboard. So one of them is meeting per stage of an opportunity. And then, again, you can create your own dashboards and meetings. We capture over 50 individual data points per meeting. So go to the next screen, please. Any questions at all? The next thing you're going to see is...
Sorry, I was just going to say, Travis, we've got a lot of feedback on that, and everybody seems to think that's a really powerful tool. What other type of analytics can we get from that? I've had a few questions about, can we convert that into percent of leads closed and things like that? What other analytics can we pull out of that and out of the utribo platform as well?
Right. So from a Meeting Mapper perspective, again, these are all reports right out of native Salesforce. There's no analytics that we use. Of course, if you have an analytics engine, you can slice and dice this data all day long. You can look at, am I manned correctly from a rep perspective, inside versus outside? Why is my outside reps having more meetings inside or at home office? Why aren't they out with the customers? How many meetings do I have planned in the future, and am I manned correctly for that uptick? How many, again, I've identified these particular stages in an opportunity or the stance, right? I haven't identified anybody that's been 4 in some of my opportunities. Well, that's a problem. So how do I do that? It's all that data structured in Meeting Mapper other than notes. So you can run reports and analytics all day long. From the Meeting Insights perspective, if you could get this information, what resonated, then populate a social media every week with what's resonating in your customer meetings, slap a little video on there, you're ahead of the game. Or link it into some other kind of marketing system, and then generate email campaigns on what's resonating for customers in a particular point in an opportunity. The power is there, and then attribute the utribo stuff with it, then it just makes it. I mean, you have more data than your competitors ever thought about to push revenue quicker and fast, and more. Mark?
Yeah, obviously, and the key thing is, yes, you can use any analytic tool with the data stored by SalesAmp and by Meeting Mapper, but all of the information is stored natively in Salesforce.
That's correct. Even Meeting Mapper stuff, we have no outside database other than Salesforce.
Right on.
And then we have, where were the meetings being held? And again, you can put whatever you want in there. It's all configurable with Meeting Mapper. So now you can track what's going on. And again, I've been in some very large corporations where they had executive briefing centers, and it's actually been, hey, if you take customers there, your likelihood of getting a deal is better than if you don't. But now you have tangible evidence, and then you can start using that from a gamification perspective, anything like that to motivate sales folks in your organization.
Great, thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
Okay. So, we talked about meetings, and really calls are meetings. It's just that they're a little bit more, sometimes a bit more tactical and a little bit more occasionally ad hoc. But, just tracking information associated with the call itself is important too. And a couple examples that we've seen is, looking at leads, and looking at the time spent on the call with leads. Was it spent on outbound calling? Was it spent on inbound calling? Was it spent on documents related to the lead, or was it spent on the time presenting to the customer? And actually mapping those against standard metrics for the company. So we can see that if we can look at our reps and we can look at our company and see how we're performing against the successful accounts. The second thing is, we can scorecard our team a little bit in terms of calling activity. I would say this by itself is a little bit dangerous, and in fact, most of our customers have found that they're really focusing on calling and calling activity and number of calls. That after using our product, they figured out very quickly that it's not about quantity, it's about quality, and that's really where it's one of the reasons we came in touch with Meeting Mapper was. Customers were really searching for ways to collect more information about that meeting. I digress here a little bit, but I think about the times I've run sales teams, and when I worked for sales managers, how many times did your sales rep have a call with an important opportunity, and as soon as the call's over, you pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, how did that call go? So capturing that information is super important. Second thing is, let's take a look at tracking opportunities. Obviously, this is a little bit more complex than a lead, but one of the things that our customers have done is they've started to look at the time spent in various sales stages. So when we're working on proposals or objection handling, how much time are we spending on inbound calls, outbound calls, document review, and so on. And of course, looking at where we're spending our time on opportunities is also important because we can actually see that good reps have a habit of not wanting to give up. And sometimes we're spending a lot of resources on deals that just won't close. And conversely, when we're coming to the end of the quarter and I've got 2 deals forecasted at 90%, I'm inclined to feel good about the one that has a little more time spent than the one that hasn't. So those are data points that we're seeing our customers collect information about related to calls.
Hey, Mark and Travis, one of the questions that just came in here that kind of talked a little bit about this this area that you were talking about, Mark. The question is, are you finding that your customers are using this more as a sales tool, meaning that the sales people directly themselves are monitoring these activities and trying to self-improve, or are you finding that it's really more of a tool that the sales managers are using to better manage the sales team, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, okay, the short answer is a little bit of both, but let me talk about that. There's an interrelationship there. If you don't make tools really handy for sales reps to use, they won't use them. They'll find any way they can to avoid using a tool that doesn't help them. So with every product, and with our product and with Meeting Mapper, you can see that we really tried to make this a tool that's easy for the sales rep to use. And of course, the information is invaluable to the company and to the rep. But if it's not easy to use, they're not going to use it. On the other hand, what we found from a management perspective is that you kind of get 2 piles of reps: the ones that are really keen to try new tools and really achieve, or they're just naturally they fall towards these types of tools, and then you have the others that need a little bit more prodding to get to use these products. But what we found in our accounts is that often we start with 1 or 2 reps that are perhaps high profile, and we find that helping them actually helps us grow within the account. We find that either the reps are having a little bit of trouble, or the reps who are really technically competent are the first people that try, and then we find that the company starts to see the benefit of the information, and we see that it grows pretty rapidly thereafter. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Travis, do you have anything to add to that?
From Meeting Mapper perspective, we have, for example, one customer that they're about a month into using Meeting Mapper, and they've already done 100 meetings in Meeting Mapper in Salesforce, documented.
Oh.
What they told me, basically, they've never had the transparency into accounts before. They've also seen a data usage increase in Salesforce of about 2%. So that means Salesforce is being used. It's getting data put in Salesforce that's relevant to be able to close business and to drive marketing activities or any other activities. So that's what we're kind of seeing from me, my perspective. Mark's right. It's sales reps that want to get better, right? And then it's management that needs to have a greater handle on what's going on in their business, because sales is getting back to the blocking and tackling, right? And you've got to be able to be ready and have your information ready, when you QBRs and bring on new reps and things like that. So that's my kind of 2 cents.
Okay, so I think we're kind of getting ready to summarize here, and of course, I think we've shown some ways to help capture information, and that information can help companies, improve the quality of their leads and lead conversion. It can help companies better qualify opportunities in your pipeline, and I believe that these types of tools really will help with adoption of Salesforce, and you'll have a much better understanding of your customers and leads. Do you have anything to add, Travis?
Yeah, I would say from the leads perspective is once you get a lead, what happens to it, being able to document what happens to it, using utribo or Meeting Mapper. Qualified leads, there's no sense in dragging things around from quarter to quarter that are never going to close. And if you got a reason not to bring that opportunity forward, you can justify it, right? you're going to have increased usage of Salesforce. You need the adoption, you need it easy to use, and you've got to get back to why you bought it, right? Increase revenue, meet the competition, and really have a central repository to know what's going on in your environment. You have a better understanding of your customers and prospects, and then how to utilize that data when you get a new prospect to leverage what you've learned to be able to move the deal quicker. Again, if your typical sales cycle takes 6 meetings to close, but you can condense it into 5, guess what? Your competition is still trying to get that 6th meeting, and it's already done. You have more KPIs. It's not the level of activity, it's what's going on inside that activity that you really want to start tracking. Are they meeting with the right people? Are they changing the perception? Are they driving revenue? And again, if you do all of these things together in a very process-oriented way, you're going to increase your revenue. That's only a natural byproduct of being able to really understand what's going on in your environment on a daily basis, to be successful.
So more sooner better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So just a quick pointer. Again, we will be sharing these documents, but both products are available on AppExchange. And as attendees of this event, you'll be entitled to a free access to the service, both services, for an extended period of time. Really, all you need to do is go to AppExchange or go to our website with these links, and you can get started within 15 minutes. You could be up and running. Travis?
And Mark, we'll put these links in the follow-up email that we send out with the documents as well.
Absolutely, yes. And finally, I guess our last any additional questions that we might have, Jake?
Yeah, we've got a few here. We've got a few nuts and bolts technical questions. So in terms of configurations, is there anything in Salesforce that needs to be done before installing either Meeting Mapper or utribo?
In terms of SalesAmp, SalesAmp is a managed package that can be installed in Pro and up, and there's really nothing because it's a managed package. It can be installed right off the AppExchange and works in conjunction with standard Salesforce APIs.
Yeah, Meeting Mapper 2, it's a managed package through Salesforce. We go through all the security reviews. And the only requirement is really you need to have campaigns enabled. But other than that, it's Group Pro on up, and there's no pre-configuration required whatsoever, other than being an admin in the org.
Perfect. And then the other question we had pop up here was in terms of where the data is residing, the meeting information, the utribo SalesAmp information. Where does all of that information reside? The person that asked this particular question is in a highly regulated industry, so they're very curious about where that data resides.
From the Meeting Mapper perspective, it's all in Salesforce. So we have no back-end service. There's nothing. It's what you put in Salesforce resides in Salesforce. So if you have, you have the uptime, you have the reliability, you have the security in place. So if you're in a highly regulated environment, if you're in a different country that has laws regarding privacy, again, that data is stored on that server in that geo with Salesforce. So we comply with all of those requirements for compliance.
Yeah, same with SalesAmp. All of the information is stored either in or related to tasks that are related to the contact or lead, and any related objects, whether they're opportunities or cases. So basically, the repository is Salesforce.
Perfect. And Travis, you talked a little bit about having some data points to track key KPIs towards the end there. We had one question that came in that said they really loved that idea and was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit and maybe provide a scenario where some of these analytics capabilities came into handy with some of your existing users.
Sure. So we have customers that needed to be able to track they really wanted a process around, planning, executing, and following up on your meetings. So we're able to build, based on Meeting Mapper, what the information you gather, they understand how many meetings the rep has been in, how many they have planned, what stage are they in the opportunity, how long have they been in that stage of the opportunity, what's their average meeting length, how many average people in the meeting, what is the, for an industry, how many average meetings are you having for an industry, right? Why are we having more meetings for telecommunications than I'm having for medical, for example, right, if you have a breadth of technology? So we're able to track all that in Meeting Mapper. Again, there's over 50 individual data points for a meeting, score of the meeting. What's your average score of the meeting? Who's 4, who's 5? Have gamification. Hey, Bob has 50 meetings and they've all been 5, and they meet the justification for being a 5, not because he has happy ears, right? Another thing is, when you say somebody is 4 in a meeting, you have to justify that reason why they're 4 based on your sales methodology. They said they'll buy, whatever based on your methodology. The champion. You say somebody's a champion. Well, what have they done to earn that champion role? You justify that. You can track all that in Meeting Mapper, then the analytics behind that with reporting or whatever analytics engine you have. So the amount of data that we provide, it's really the quintessential big data when you think about it. Because we operate at the most basic level of the sales process, the meeting, but least documented in a CRM is the meeting. Because a 2-hour meeting is condensed to had a good meeting, went to lunch, scheduled another meeting. That does nothing to build strategy. Meeting Mapper allows you to build strategy as the sales process continue and then leverage that later on. That's kind of I guess, hope that answered.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then just we've got a few minutes left here, so I'm wondering, we talked a little bit about a culture of constant meeting improvement. We talked about it not only on a sales meeting standpoint, but also, Mark, you mentioned it with the overall sales call and just constantly improving the sales call and meeting. I'm wondering if both of you could kind of expand a little bit on how somebody who hasn't implemented that type of culture or doesn't have that type of culture in their company, how they might go about implementing that type of culture of constant meeting or sales improvement. Just a couple of thoughts as we kind of wrap it up.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think really what we're talking about here is whether it's a meeting or simply a phone call, we're really talking about capturing these events. And what we've seen is that, unless you really can buy into the idea of using Salesforce for nothing more than a contact database and maybe a ad hoc forecasting tool, then you're not going to be able to capture this information. So the first step is to think about, well, what sort of information would be useful for me to get a better picture of my customer and my opportunities and my leads. And, activities like meetings and calls are pretty valuable, in my opinion. I guess in our opinion, I guess that's why we base our business on it. But, we've seen first steps. We've seen a few customers that have actually started with email, because email is a little bit easier. At least some folks believe that email is a little bit easier, but capturing that email information. But the problem is, how is it related to a real conversation? And, there's a lot of stuff in email that isn't necessarily all that useful. So we actually contend that, starting with capturing live activities with customers is really the most important thing to get started with. Travis?
Yeah, I would agree. And how Meeting Mapper it was designed, it's actually the flow of a conversation or meeting. But with Meeting Mapper, you could do the crawl, walk, run, right? Crawl is, just take notes in the meeting, in Meeting Mapper, and start putting data in there. The next is walking. Okay, put more participants. Do the role. Do the stance. Do the level of participation. Take individual notes about that person, right? Then the run is, hey, you know what? Next step action items. Everything that Meeting Mapper encompasses. So it's, you get back to, anybody's read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, right? Change is hard for some people, but in order to really be competitive in today's market, you've got to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the competitors. And how you do that is with intelligence. Because at the end of the day, knowledge is king. And that's what really wins the deal that you can leverage later on. So that's, from our perspective, meetings, interactions, phone calls, it's all the same thing. You're selling something every time you talk. You know, you're selling yourself, your products, your services, something. So it's important to be able to document that very easily. So that's kind of my take.
That's perfect. And since we're up against the time here, I guess we'll leave it there. So thank you, Mark and Travis, for participating, and thank you, everybody, for joining and listening to us. And again, we'll send a follow-up email with the documents and links that we talked about in the webinar here. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.